Bit about me. I'm Ed. I'm one of the co-founders of Hustle Badger. We provide super practical advice for product managers and on AI skills. And you should definitely check us out if you are in need of either of those things. Every week we have different product experts and leadership experts come along and share their wisdom with us. Today, we're really lucky to have Dave come and share some of his wisdom with us. He's been a CPO at various different companies before, and then more recently, he's been a leadership coach focusing on neurodiversity, which is what he's going to talk about with us today. Dave, over to you.
Great. Well, nice to be here. Thanks very much, Ed. I'm just going to click the buttons and share my screen. Um, Hopefully everyone can see that all right. Look for
Yeah,
some nods. I'm just going to rearrange my screen so I can see you all still. Hold on one sec. There we go. Awesome. Um, Maybe before I dive into some conversation and slides, just a little bit about why I do what I do. So, confidence in. We work on it's leadership. We do leadership training, but specifically for people who think differently, for leaders who think differently. Just explain why that's the case. When I was about 10 years old, I wasn't really very good at school. I was doing very badly, lots of Fs. And it turned out I was dyslexic and ADHD. A little tricky because at that era in UK education, showing my age a little. The It wasn't recognised. Dyslexia wasn't recognised in part of the UK I was at school at, so very little support or help. But one day, somebody put me in front of a computer. It was a very new thing. It was a BBC B, if anybody knows what those, one of those were basically a huge beige piece of plastic with a massive keyboard that plugged into a television. And I suddenly found myself being able to use this thing and be good at it. And before I knew what had happened, I knew more about it than the adults, and suddenly found sort of that realized I could do stuff and I wasn't dumb because I thought I was dumb. I struggled to read the board, words danced on the screen, on the book page, sorry. My handwriting was atrocious. I couldn't spell, all these things, all the measures of whether you're clever or not were pretty poor. But suddenly I realized I wasn't. And as I got a little bit older into secondary school or high school for those abroad, the things got a little bit more advanced, and we had word processors and spell check, and suddenly all my grades changed with this tool. Suddenly changed how I could perform, and it was the same brain, the same me, everything the same, just this new tool that helped me with a particular challenge. And the reason I'm sharing that story is in a leadership from coaching leaders for the last 7 years. So often there's imposter syndrome, or there's a feeling I can't be good enough, or my boss is telling me I'm getting Fs. I'm being told I'm not executive enough, or I'm not strategic enough. But I feel like I'm all of these things, but nobody else seems to see it. But given the right tools, whether they're technology or whether they're some other kind of tools, there's lots of other kinds. All those people I've worked with have transformed how everyone else views them and how they perform and how they achieve, and they're all doing great things. And that's the why I do what I do. It's exciting to see people excel when they find the right tools. And I think with AI today, there's so much more potential that we haven't even scratched the surface of that being a tool to help everybody excel. So hopefully that sets the scene a little bit. Let's jump into some slides, which for some reason have stopped working. Bear with me. I will get there. There we go. So the aim of this short talk, and I'll keep it short so we can have lots of conversation, is that my aim is that you'll understand what I call signal drift and why it happens. You'll understand how to land your thinking with strategic influence, and you'll understand how to use a very simple little tool called signal prep, which is only 10 minutes to use before a meeting. Now, you may or may not be neurodiverse or have any sort of condition like I do. Doesn't really matter. These tools will be powerful for everybody, and signal drift happens for everyone. But people who think differently have some extra challenges when it comes to signal drift. So these tools have extra value to them. Just like everybody enjoys spell check, but I rely on it. That's the only difference. So hopefully you'll all get value from this, no matter who you are and how you think. The things I'm sharing in a minute are have been well proven. We've used these for the last 7 years, as I've mentioned, along with lots of other things. The big thing that always surprises me was when we learned that we dramatically reduce people's stress. It wasn't just that they got the promotion they were aiming for and all that side of coaching that goes on. It's the reduction in stress and more energy that was really big and noticeable. And if we engage with these tools and we engage and recognize and believe that people that just because the way we're showing up today or being heard today is not necessarily maximizing our potential. When it really does feel like if we get that right, those that perhaps are underestimated right now are the ones that when they get everything aligned, when they're fully understood by others, are the ones that are going to succeed the biggest. And it's that last bit about being understood by others that today's about. It's what signal drift is. There are three really common mistakes we see all the time. You might recognize some of these. The first is not speaking in your audience's language. Now, I normally work with leaders, so we would say the execs or the board's language, but not speaking in their language. And this is when leaders or managers, doesn't really matter what role you're in. I'll probably say leaders all the time because that's who I talk to all the time. Apologies if that's not who you are. But this is when leaders explain the complexity in great detail, hoping it will speak for itself. And it looks like a really detailed update with lots of context, really careful accuracy, all the things that made them amazing practitioners, to be honest. But that's not how you speak to that audience, to an exec audience. That's not how you speak to leadership. They're looking for a headline. They need to know they need the because so that decision. They need to know what's got that clarity. And when you have heaps of detail and complexity and you've covered all edge cases, you have no message that's repeatable by the people in the room when you leave the room. And that's the key to influence. If you really think about influencing, it means that somebody's going to repeat the message you gave them. And if you aren't delivering a message that's repeatable, then you can never be very influential. It's really crucial, especially when decisions are going to be made when you're not in the room. Most people don't realize they're doing this because it feels thorough, it feels responsible, it feels, especially if you've come from a product and engineering background. I was a software engineer way back when, a C++ software engineer in the days of Windows NT. And most people here won't even know what that is. But you feel like it proves you're competent. But in the space of trying to influence and talk to leadership, that detail is against us. It's costly because the influence of the decision just becomes too noisy. You aren't going to get the decision you want. You'll get probably awkward follow-up questions that instead of strengthening your story and strengthening your influence, delay you, take you off track, completely confuse the audience and lose momentum. Second one, not defining the signal. This is what happens when you assume that just shipping and working hard, people will naturally align with you. I work super hard, I put the effort in, surely everyone's just going to align with us and see the great stuff. You'll recognize this if priorities keep shifting after meetings. Like when you go into a meeting and things get agreed but stakeholders leave with a different interpretation or the outcome changes. And the cost is rework. The cost is when your teams get slower buy-in or get rework, or worse still for you as individual leaders, the cost is you lose credit or you gain a reputation of being the person that gets the job done, the execution person, not the person, instead of being known as the person that gives strategic thinking and drives strategic decisions, which is what you need to be viewed as if you want to be succeeding at higher levels in the organization. It's not about just executing. And then the third one there, not leading the room. This most shows up when people fall into what I call fix mode, jumping into fix mode. And it's really common. Like we spend a lot of our days firefighting and we jump into fixed mode. And for a lot of us, we enjoy it too. It's like I fix stuff, I help people, I feel rewarded, I get a little bit of dopamine hit when I solve that problem, and that person looks happier because of it. It's a very natural thing. But when we think about influencing and driving strategic change, it's far from it, unfortunately. Instead, when we jump into fixed mode and forget to lead the room will go quiet, the room will get blank, or suddenly political questions get raised, or other things happen. It's the same when we think speed equals leadership and equals going faster, or we stay quiet to avoid the conflict. These tactics always backfire. Instead, we need to work out instead of losing trust, we have to work out how we're going to gain trust. And that mistake can be really costly. You can lose sponsorship, your scope can expand on projects, you'll lose the opportunity cost. You won't be able to take people with you. And over time, again, you're going to be the person that misses out on the next bigger role when somebody else took it instead of you. Does any of this make any sense to you guys so far? Just in the chat window, does anybody recognize any of this, or am I talking absolute nonsense? Cool, great. So
And,
a few people
and
definitely feel this. You've heard this before. You feel this. You might have seen it.
and
Awesome.
Dave, so here you're talking about the signal as being like those memorable headlines that when people leave the room, they've got that message. That's what they're going to go and repeat to other people, and that's how your message kind of gets, you know,
Definitely one
heard
of
throughout
part
the
of it.
organization. Yeah, okay.
Totally. I've just talked through this, so we don't need to stay on this slide, but you kind of get the idea. So what changes when we get it right, when we get the signal drift? Well, that's signal drift, where basically signal drift is when our message isn't landing to our audience. Somehow in the transmission, things get lost. Either it becomes fuzzy, it becomes broad, it can't be repeated. Like Ed's just repeating there that's all the same thing. The message has got lost or weakened, and we can't have that. We need to change that. So what happens when we get it right? When we get it right, the exec meeting is much easier to prep for. And most importantly, you know what the key sentences are you need to be talking about and what your so what is. You walk into those high stake meetings feeling you walk in with the information you need and a plan so you can lead the room to a decision. And that's the key thing about decision here. Like nobody is interested in status updates. No leader wants a status update. They want to know what the decisions are that need to be made to keep things moving forwards. The only reason they want a status update is to know whether they need to be getting upset if things are going backwards. But then there's a decision to be made. So it's the decision that we need to focus on. When you get it right, you won't leave meetings with more homework, more tasks, more research, more questions, more, how about you go and look at this first before we make the decision? And perhaps important for many people, your team stops this constant, it says contact, it should say context, sorry, that constant context switching, which leaves you and your teams with very little energy at the end of the week. If you don't address it and don't fix it, it has a compounding effect over time. It means that all that great work you do, you don't get the credit to, and you definitely lose the credit of executive presence or being seen as strategic to get the promotion you want. Assuming that's your route, of course. I'm talking to people who it is normally. You're what you want. You end up with more meetings and more clarification loops, and decisions get slower, and you're dragged into more detail, and you feel like you're being held, dragged over the coals all the time. There's an increased inconsistency, and for you personally, especially people who think differently that I work with in the neurodiverse field, we end up regularly, people with, for example, with ADHD, like me, will go into what's called hyper focus. We'll be really obscenely focused on a problem or a piece of work, and we'll go very deep at it, be obsessed by it, sometimes described as workaholic. But you end up in this going on all the time, peaks and troughs so close together, the peak and the trough so close that you're just depleted and lose energy. And whilst you might get labeled as being, intelligent, clever, delivering really good stuff, you, because of that last piece, because it's impossible to sustain the energy, you won't have momentum that's level. You end up being not consistent enough. And consistency is one of the most important things for all leaders. And inconsistency is one of the things that will always put a worry in people's minds of whether you should be in that next higher paid promotion job. So, amongst lots of tactics and solutions and tools to help with this that are often very specific to individuals, this is one that seems to work that everybody finds useful across the board. So, I thought I'd share that with you today. We call it signal prep. It's just three simple questions. It'll take you 10 minutes. You just do it before every meeting. It's not complicated. It's built on the methodologies we have called calm leadership. And really, out of calm leadership, we're focused. The signal prep really focuses on clarity, being clear, being intentional, being regulated and repeatable. And the regulated is super important so we don't end up with burnout. I'm not sure if any of you saw Lenny's tech workforce survey last year, but the number of people who reported to either being burnt out or suffering from it at that point was phenomenal. I can't remember the exact number, but it was well over 50%. So we must make sure we're not burning out because that's no good for the people we're trying to serve as leaders. The three steps are super easy. It's three questions. Step one is what do I need from the room? Step two is what's my one line recommendation? And step three is what will they repeat when I'm not in the room? Let me just check. Yeah, I forgot what the next slide was. Sorry. Um, so at step one, it's really about making it very clear very early on what it is you want as an outcome from the people in the room. So too often, instead of saying we need a decision on A or X and Y, and this is my recommendation, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about why that's the recommendation, we do it the other way around. We spend ages giving context and a huge story, and the room is lost completely. They're just sitting there wanting to know what it is that you want from me. So we start by ensuring we're really clear what it is we want from the audience, and we get that message out very early on in the conversation. Step two is making sure you know what your recommendation is and having it really clean and tidy and clear. A recommendation that comes across, that's your credibility, that's you saying this, why we should do this thing. If it's not short and clear and got some justification and easily, you're rolling it off your tongue and talking about it with confidence. If it's not clear what that is and you're umming and ahhing and unsure and maybes, that's not going to get a recommend. That's all that's going to do is create nerves amongst the audience. So we need to practice that. We need to know what that is. I'm not necessarily saying practice saying the words out loud, but we need to know what it is we're going to say and be really clear. We don't make it up as we go. Have a vague idea. And I see loads of people. It's amazing the volume of people who will go into meetings, no matter what the meeting is, with and make it up on the spot instead of prepare, and then wonder why the message didn't land. So, well, did you prepare? No. Well, maybe you shouldn't be quite so ad hoc if we want it to land. And then step three is being really clear what you want them to say when you're not in the room. Now, you're not going to tell them that, obviously, but if you know what it is, you're going to use that word in conversations. You're going to use that phrase in conversations. You're going to, or that meaning. And none of this is by script, by the way, whilst we're writing things down and planning what we might say. It's not to say you're reading it off like a script. It's just meaning that you've got the principles, you know how you might say it. So obviously you're going to be authentic in the room and not reading it. But if you already know how you want them to talk about it without you in the room, when somebody asks a question, and this is key, when that question comes up, the answer is often not a direct answer to the question, but this, what you want them to say without you in the room. You have to obviously address the question to some extent, but it's getting that repeatable piece in. Hey, Ed, a question or something.
Yeah. Could you give an example of how step two and step three are different? Because they seem quite
Yeah,
similar to me.
yeah, they are similar, very. Um, the repeatable thing is often closer to the outcome and the win and why it's so valuable for the business. So I'm currently in a conversation today in a board meeting about killing part of the product. The recommendation is we kill part of the problem. The thing we're famous for, we're going to kill it. And instead go all in on a agentic solution that we've developed and is flying off the shelf. Now, that that's the recommendation, but the thing we actually want them to repeat when we're not in the room is about our future. Is about that old thing is not going to ensure our future and drive an exit that we want. They're a VC-backed business. It's not going to drive the exit we want. It's only going to drive. It's going to lose value every day. And that's the bit we want them to repeat, the fact that the old thing is going to get this old piece of this old feature, this old, well, product line is going to have diminishing returns. So hopefully that helps, Ed. And great question, because I should really have put examples in. Apologies, I didn't. But yeah, that's a real life example from today, literally. I've just removed some of the details so that I don't breach NDAs. But hopefully that helps everyone.
That's really clear. Thanks.
I'm just reading the comment from Paul alongside this. There's a great know, do, feel framework. In particular, people tend to overlook. Ah, lovely, Paul. You've beaten me to the next few slides. So hold on to that thought, Paul. I should have got you to say this in a couple of seconds instead. Couple of things to remember. Lead with the destination, not the journey. If they can't repeat it, it did not land. Ideally, you want to hear them repeat it in the meeting. That's pretty common. And to Paul's point, prep how they feel, not just what you're going to show, but we want to think about how we want to make them feel. And this is the one-pager prep to think about. Oh, don't be sorry, Paul. It's great that you're. I might have missed. We might not have had it. So the one-pager is think about the emotion first. How do I want people to feel? And then answer the 3 questions of decision, meaning, and memory. And that's really the framework: decision, meaning, memory. Any questions at this point, Natasha? What if there's no conclusion yet? A lot of the conversations I have with my exec. Oh, sorry. Other people ask questions and then I lost your question. Other people, a conversation I have with my exec are to set up to get to a decision. Okay, cool. Presumably, normally the conversations I would be in would be to provide, I would still want some sort of decision from them, or there'd be some sort of recommendation. So that whilst it might not be the final piece, normally there's milestones or the stage gates and we want them to approve to get through it, or we want to approve continue funding this thing, or we want to approve some decision we need to make. If it's simply purely a status meeting with no decision, this probably isn't the framework for that. Paul, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Dave, to Natasha's point. I think my view is you still want to set the context of what the meeting's about, even if you know that this is the plan for the plan, if you know what I mean, because you're, whatever you call it, shepherding them towards where you want to get to. So I think a framework like this is still valuable, Natasha, because whether it's this framework or the know, do, feel thing, you're just changing what your expectations are for the meeting, but you can still voice those so that then at the end of it you go, have we achieved what we meant to achieve today? Yeah, because we weren't going to actually decide anything today, but we were aware that we're going to decide something next time, which is again often overlooked, and you get that drift of just meeting after meeting and the exec not being forced to think about things properly.
I might just respond to that live. I hear that. One can plan, right? One can try, and we can be like, okay, cool. My plan is to shepherd or to herd all these cats and make them go into a single direction. I find that maybe this is just my organization, but the leadership of my organization tend to view collaborative decision making and how you contribute to that, how you drive the actual decision making forward, to be a marker of that strategic leadership, of sort of valuable input. For someone who is neurodivergent, it's very hard to, like, I have ADHD, for example. It's very hard for me to like follow a line of thinking like thoroughly enough, like beforehand, to be able to be like, okay, cool, like this is sort of the full set of outcomes that, you know, I'll be able to sort of, you know, choose your adventure and like drive towards. I think that's the trap that I fall into. These aren't status updates, they are like collaboration sessions, but sometimes I get maybe almost like too caught up with not having thought everything all the way through, and that hurting my credibility.
Definitely understand, Natasha, and thank you for sharing about the ADHD. That I think maybe, and you know, this might not be valid for you, Natasha, because everyone's different. But the kind I've had that kind of conversation before, what you're describing, and the area we practiced a lot with that particular person and a few others actually was about trying to level up the thinking and stay out of the detail. This is where the detail problem comes in. When you losing the track, you can follow the track asynchronously after, like before or after it. Of course you can, but live it starts to get messy, especially if we get slightly waylaid or focus on one point more than something else, and you know get distracted with it in the live environment. Normally, trying to stay out of the detail really helps. And the detail, if it is a exec level meeting rather than say a planning meeting with engineers, this would not be valid for, the detail isn't as valuable as you think, and trying to avoid that detail. Apart from recognize that edge cases are edge cases, and maybe we don't need to go into them down that rabbit hole, and stay out of the rabbit holes in the session normally helps. And you know there are other tactics that we haven't got time for today, unfortunately, go into detail to help with that. But this will help because it will keep you focused. If you can keep just scanning down at your three things, it'll help you keep back out and come back to the top level, which is really where the big decisions have got to be made. Otherwise the wrong, if they're not, and we end up in detailed conversations with the leadership team, we need to have a different conversation and thinking, how come that's the conversation we end up having? Is it because you're taking in too much detail? Is it somebody else in the room who keeps bringing in all the detail? How do we change that? Because that's the wrong level of conversation probably for the room anyway. Not sure if that helps, Natasha. I'm
No, it
generalizing, so
does.
apologies.
No, it does. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Always nervous. Don't mean to, because it's making general answers because we're all different people. I'm going to skip these. They're in there from a different slide deck Nick borrowed from. So apologies. We don't need to talk about my mission or vision. So far, this approach, how does that make sense? Just drop in the chat window if the concept makes sense to you, 1 to 10. Cool. So far, looking good, like it makes sense. I love to see in the chat window a yes if you're willing to try this tomorrow or in your next high stakes meeting. Great, Lizzie. Great, Gabby. Awesome. Good. Thanks, Paul. That's what we want to see. Can't wait to see you doing it, Paul. Brilliant. That's the point of this. These might, back to Ed mentioned at the beginning, Hustle Badger being around practical support use. I wanted to share something you can take away and use immediately. Now, the next section you might not be able to take away and use immediately, depending on how AI fluent you are. But I'm going to share. We talked at the beginning about AI changing the game here quite a lot, and being just like I rely on spell checker. I now rely on Claude Code and Claude Cowork for so many more things, and it makes me so much better at my job, and takes away so much pain for me. I'm completely addicted to it. I'm going to show just one example. We've got loads of others, but just one example because I thought it was easy to show. It's a simple plugin, so if you use Cowork at all, Claude Cowork, they have a thing called plugins, which is basically just, it's a little bit more complicated than this, but in reality, it's a saved prompt. That's probably the easiest way of thinking about it for everyone. And it comes with some saved connections as well. So this particular one connects to my Gmail, to Slack and Granola. Took about 30 minutes to write and test it. So it's not hard to do this stuff. And no line, I didn't have to write a line of code. I didn't have to be technical. In fact, I didn't write it. Claude wrote it for me. I told it what I wanted to do. It wrote me it, and then I got it to a different part of Claude to review whether what it had written was good and make it better. And then I started using it every day. And what it does is it reads my email and my Slack, all my meeting transcripts. I use Granola for every meeting. It's on now properly, I imagine. It automatically pops on. And every morning it looks at the last 24 hours of all that content, cross-references it all, and creates for me a simple briefing file. And I have more than one because of the nature of the work I do. I mean, other companies' email accounts, and I have Slack accounts for different companies. So it could be handling lots of things. In the example I've given you, it's just one, but it could be handling lots. And what it does for me in the briefing file is it gives me a simple breakdown. And I'm going to show you a real example from this morning. I've just had to block out some people's names. It shows what decisions are waiting for me. Where is signal shifting? Where are things going off potentially? Where are things going cold? Cross references because it's useful for me to recognize some patterns. And it tells me what it thinks I should do first. And I look at this at 8 a.m. every morning. Here's the example brief. This was from today. I've just put X's everywhere there was a company name or an individual, so that hopefully it still makes sense for you. You can see it's suggesting some simple replies. It's telling me what I need to do. It already checked, for example, on that DocuSign. It already knew that I'd already reviewed the thing because I'd written an email saying that. It already knew that we negotiated the terms. Literally all I've got to do now is click sign. So that's really helpful. I can just go do that. It's pointing out to me where things are, perhaps where the signal is wobbling or where things haven't been finalized. It's highlighting to me where there's some analysis, some cross-reference things, some tasks and things I have to think about that are supporting more than one piece of work I'm doing right now. And it's telling me what it thinks I have to do immediately. And it generated that from 43 emails, from 10 Slack messages, from 5 meetings, and it removed 34 that it looked at because they were too noisy. It has a hard filter on what it looks at and what it doesn't. So it doesn't look at all. Otherwise, I'd end up with like things in here about mountain bikes because I'm a mountain biker and get lots of emails about mountain bikes promoting stuff to me. So that's why the numbers are reasonably small because of that. Without it, I'd miss a bunch of this stuff. Totally. Even though I follow getting things done and I'm pretty good at following it, I would still have missed stuff. I'd missed this DocuSign email, hadn't even seen it. It had got lost amongst mountain bike videos probably. So it was super useful for me. So it's just an example. So in case you don't know what it looks like, the first side of this is what a plugin looks like in Claude Code. It's just a screen grab of Claude desktop app, sorry. Claude Cowork, not Claude Code, apologies. The signal brief, the actual skill there is just in English language. You can see the steps. It's just telling it what to do. So it's easy. Anyone can write one of these if they've had the bit of guidance. And then I've scheduled it to use that thing every day. And that's been done in Cowork. So you can see that. So really easy to get something up and running and that's powerful. And that's it. I think we've got a few minutes for questions and any chatter, or we can all go and enjoy the sun, whatever anyone wants to do. Is that all right, Ed?
That was great, Dave. Thank you so much. I love that skill, by the way. I've got a very similar one, a daily briefing one, which I use. And the nice thing about Claude is you can read it in Claude, right? I've actually kind of
Yeah,
built out my own like interface. So I have a to-do list, which looks a bit like any other to-do list, UI, but it's all
yeah,
powered by Claude. So Claude updates it every day and kind of like does
that's cool.
a read through, which is
Real
nice.
cool. Mine just goes into Obsidian, but I lived in Obsidian before Claude, so I'm a slightly addicted to it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed. Dave, I'm curious as to any tips about how to get people to identify as people who think differently in a way that is appropriate to maybe you've got an inkling that someone operates slightly differently, but they're not self-declared as neurodivergent or whatever. Any tips on navigating that, please?
I think for, I'm not, a lot of people who I've worked with didn't know they were neurodivergent. And then at some point they found out while we were working together. And it turned out retrospectively that like 80% of the people I've worked with and coached over the last 7 years, roughly 80%, were neurodivergent and hence now specializing in that space. So given that experience, I think the more important thing than in helping people feel, if they don't know if they don't know it, then they can't reveal it. And if they're not comfortable revealing it for whatever reason, maybe they're worried there's some stigma attached. Like there are definitely people I've worked with who don't want their boss to know because they feel like they might stop them getting promoted. Then instead focus on on those pains, on the condition you see, on the challenge they see, and think about how to help them with that challenge. Like one really super simple piece is thinking about how reactive versus reflective people are. And are your decision making processes supportive of people who are reflective, of people that need the pre-read or need time to process what's just been said to be able, we talked earlier, the lady said was open about her being ADHD and in real time struggled with the conversation for there's loads of good real psychology reasons why she would do that too. And that's not to say she couldn't really have an impact on the decision and spot some. She probably can spot because one of the other things, one of the superpowers, rather than one of the challenges, is pattern recognition. And she may well have spotted a pattern that nobody else spotted that would really impact the decision being made. So finding a way to allow your processes to accommodate the challenges rather than worrying about people putting their hand up, I think is much more interesting. And reflective, reactive is a really good starting point to explore with people openly because it doesn't have any stigma attached to it. I'm reflective, I'm reactive. There's no label that might worry people that it's going to impact their career. Not that it should anyway, but in certain cultures, it definitely does. Hopefully that helps, Paul. Sorry, it might not be the answer you wanted.
No, it's perfect. I was just trying to find a way to. What I didn't want to do was potentially step on a landmine by attempting to do the right thing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Just focus on the pain. Like you seem to have this problem.
That's a great thing to think about. And a great question that I could open is like, okay, how do people tend to decide here? Are you reflective, reactive in the moment? What are you? Okay, do we agree that we should have a process that suits everybody's thinking style? Okay, let's go.
We used to do that regularly I had a DR team where they were all VPs, and we had a process where we did it once, and they wanted to do it every month, which I wasn't expecting. Where we asked everybody, one point, a person was in the hot seat, and everyone else in the room had to say one thing to them that they were grateful for, and one thing they wanted them to stop doing. And all the other person in the hot seat could say was thank you, nothing else. You weren't allowed to say anything else. You had to look them in the eye and say thank you. That was it. And then thankfully you were out the hot seat and it was somebody else's turn. And it's quite challenging and people are a bit polite and don't say very useful things the first time. But that brought out all these things. And the team wanted to do it. I thought we'd just do it once, maybe twice. It became a standing thing. Our weekly one-to-one, our weekly group meetings, the weekly DR meeting, once a month it was this session. And I carried on for 2.5 years. They always wanted it. I constantly tried to stop it because I wasn't sure it was valuable, but they always wanted it. And in reflection, it was like super valuable. You could see it, when you looked at it, you could see it. It bonded the team, but it dealt with a lot of these issues in a very organic, human way. And they popped out, and to the extent that there was a gentleman, I'll call him Ed, since there's an Ed in the room. It's not this Ed, obviously, but the and your name was the top of the screen, Ed. That was what it really was. I was looking for a random name. We'll call him Ed. Where in the meeting, people would say, let's not hold this decision now because Ed needs time to reflect. Let's pick this up in the morning. And it wasn't me, it was other people in the team. And so the team really supported each other because they all wanted everybody's full impact in the full collaboration. So you can get there. It's just finding the vehicles to make that happen organically without forcing it. Hopefully that helps, Paul.
Dave, thank you so much for this. This has been fantastic. Really appreciate how practical you've been with a lot of your tips and also how wise you've been with some of these kind of topics that are difficult to navigate. Thank you very much, everyone. As I mentioned, we'll share a few links for Dave's website and his LinkedIn in a follow-up email, and the recording of this will be on YouTube shortly.
Thanks, Ed.
Great. Hope to see you all soon. Bye.